The Beast 666 exposed. In this video, we're going to talk about the man who called himself the Beast and who signed his letters with the number 666, the notorious Aleister Crowley, the famous or infamous rather occultist of British provenance from the 20th century, one of the best known people in the spiritual and esoteric space of the past century. And we're going to learn and find out who he was, what his philosophy was that he introduced, the Thelema philosophy with its left-hand path orientation. We're going to learn how that orientation is different to the right-hand path, spirituality, that I teach here as well, amongst others. And we're going to look at his astrology, to decode the astrology of this man, to understand where he came from, why he was doing what he was doing, what his mission was, and very interestingly, how his mission and his legacy connects with wokeism and the woke mind virus that we're dealing with today. Because you will find out in this video that there is a huge connection there, maybe unexpected, but very real. So let's get into it. So Aleister Crowley was clearly one of the most influential, the best known and most important occultists or spiritual, esoteric practitioners, whatever you want to call it, of the 20th century. He was called at some point the world's most dangerous man by British newspapers of the time. He was the founder of Thelema, a neo-religion, which still to this day has followers everywhere. He was hugely influential in his writings on practical occultism. He founded some brotherhoods or some cultic kind of groups like the AA and the OTO, which are also still in some, various permutations exist today. And he was extremely influential on the culture, on the cultural figures, like people like Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, and Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, and others like Terence McKenna, the psychedelics guy, and Jack Parsons, the inventor of rocketry, who had a Netflix series shot about him, published about him recently. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. All of these people, they were hugely influenced by Crowley. And you could say, to some way, you could say his influence was reached even further, not just these kind of counterculture figures of the 60s and the 70s, but it in some way extended even all the way into the nascent Silicon Valley culture, the startup culture, right? Which has changed the world, because Silicon Valley kind of came out of that counterculture of the 60s and the 70s, just mixed with tech, basically, right? So hugely influential, much more so than you would think, especially if you go back to his ideas and see what the ideas were that he planted as a seed in the culture through those people that I mentioned and others. By the way, in this video, I'm gonna, as a little nugget at the end, I'm gonna share with you who Jack Parsons is today in his current incarnation, right? So stay tuned and make sure to watch this video until the end. This is going to be so packed with different angles and insights and special insights, ultra sapient insights. So Aleister Crowley. Now, why did he have this huge influence on all of these people that I mentioned, right? What was it that he was teaching? This is important. So first of all, he was a powerful practitioner. He was a fourth level initiate in the Mithraic 7 levels, which corresponds with the 6th crystallization in the Ultra Sapient system. Now I'm going to explain this more in future, but be that as it may, just for what you need to know, on the 4th level initiation, which Crowley had, you basically have complete control over your mind. There's no more monkey mind, mental chatter. You are able to access noetic intelligence, telepathy, clairvoyance, and so on at will, and you're able to influence reality through rituals and other means, right? And as a comparison, people like Rudolf Steiner or Helena Blavatsky, they are similar. There's a similar level of initiation. But he was a powerful dude on that level, right? He could do things. He had a presence, an aura, a magnetic charisma. He could influence reality. He could get people to do things. But what did he teach? What was his teaching? So the core of his teaching, Thelema, which he presented as a new religion, was a worldview, a philosophy which centers on that famous sentence, "Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which basically means, and then there is this love under will, right? Is the kind of addendum, but the true will, basically, that he posits is the true will of the self, and you're supposed to find that, and you're supposed to sacrifice everything for that, right? And how do you do that in Crowley's system? You do that through transgressions. This is why it's the so-called left-hand path. In the left-hand path, you reach higher powers, you reach higher insights, you reach higher levels of consciousness through transgressions, through breaking taboos. For instance, through breaking all of the boundaries of proper morals and of whatever, family, of morality, of anything that is traditions, that are boundaries, that are existing, things that you're not supposed to do, right? You break those, you transgress. And by transgressing, from that transgression, there is power derived from it, right? So for instance, this is not a completely new philosophy. Obviously, Crowley didn't invent this. There is many, generations, centuries of this is a time-old practice. It goes all the way back to Lucifer, basically, or the snake. But you have this in places all over the world. The Agori, for instance, in India, who are people who, they are these left-hand path practitioners, tantrikas. And they go and they do all kinds of weird things with they eat rotten food, rotten flesh, and they eat people, basically, and they dance on graves, and they do all kinds of very weird things with excrements and so on. Like basically just breaking every taboo and training themselves to not be disgusted, but to rather kind of stay aware and awake, fully present and aware and awake when others would shy away and others would have fear, and thereby basically overcoming the fear or overcoming the disgust. And that is, if you do it with concentration, it is a way to power, right? Is a way to power. But what type of power? This is obviously a type of power that leads you to the glorification of the ego. The glorification of the ego, which gets more and more power from these transgressions, right? Now, that's the end result of this. But what's important is the counterculture people, they love this, right? They love this. They saw this as, this is a philosophy of transgressions, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And they, embrace this as a sort of liberation, emancipation, right? In the 60s and the 70s, when they discovered Crowley, they had him as like this prophet of emancipation, right? Because they could go against all the prudish ethics of their parents, and they didn't have to live these kind of lives that were already predetermined. They could just do what they want. And then they had figures like Lucifer and Prometheus, right? Those are the figures that are standing for breaking boundaries, going beyond everything that is sacred, everything that is moral, breaking the boundaries and concentrating force and energy into the development of yourself, which is then elevated into this glorious thing. It's called self-realization, right? I'm going to tell you in a second how this is different to right-hand path, but to the right-hand path, to what we're doing, what I'm teaching you here, right? Or what, many traditions and practices have been teaching across the ages as well. But let's go think about this again. So the left-hand path is about breaking any type of boundaries, breaking any type of thing that holds you back, basically, right? Anything that holds you back, whether that's the family, whether that's the sanctity of women, the sanctity of children, the sanctity of truth, the sanctity of your own health. All of those are just seen as boundaries that you have to overcome, right? So where do you see this? Where do you see this? Does this sound familiar? Does this sound familiar to you? Well, all you have to do is open your eyes in 2024 and look around you, and you will see this in many places today. Because this is exactly the philosophy of wokeism. The philosophy of wokeism is to transgress, go beyond all of these boundaries. All you need to do is look at the Paris Olympics opening ceremony, right? Which was, which had like all the attention for all of these reasons, all the wrong reasons. And because a lot of people were very, very upset with it, but others found it great. Obviously, the people who made this, the people who support this, they think it's great. They think it's total liberation, total emancipation. Break all the boundaries. Do what you want. Do what thou wilt, as Crowley would say, right? And Crowley, if he was able to see the Paris Olympics of 2024, he would celebrate. He would say that he won. He succeeded. He succeeded in creating a new religion. They're not called Thelema, they're called woke right now, right? But in essence, he succeeded. He created this mass movement, right? Kind of this incredible impact on collective consciousness, right? So now Crowley, he presented himself as a prophet. He said there's a new age coming and he wanted to be the prophet of it. He used different terms. Obviously, he called it like the age of Horus and he had other names for it. But in essence, he is, in many ways, you can say the prophet of wokeism, of the current woke mindset and of the current woke mind virus that exists in the world. So you could say that the tide is turning now with Trump coming back and with opposition growing everywhere to wokeism. But make no mistake, actually we haven't seen the worst parts yet. It needs to get much darker before it can get light, before the light of consciousness can embrace the entire collectivity of humanity again. So let's look at Aleister Crowley's chart to see how what I've been saying here is reflected in the chart, how we can decode the intention of his soul, and even what this mission or what this prophetic kind of drive that he had, which I've connected here with wokeism, how that is reflected in his archetypal energies, like where it comes from, who was the energy behind this. All of this we can see in the chart, and I can show you some very clear markers that back up everything I've been saying. So now when you look at the chart of Aleister Crowley, we've got here a very complex chart, obviously, right? So with a lot of different, you see lots of different, both complex aspect figures, tensions, as well as a lot of harmonic or empowering relations. It's not an easy chart in any way, but what I like to do is I like to add very important and significant asteroids because they add so much detail to the story. They add so much detail to the story that most astrologists these days, they're missing really. They're not really getting the full picture. So let's do that and you'll see what I mean. So we have somebody here who's got on his ascendant is a Leo ascendant, right? So somebody who thrives on his creativity, and he has what? Hypnos, and Magion, right? So the hypnotic magician, right? The person who has the hypnotic gaze or the hypnotic magical presence, right? That can influence others. And he has on the MC, he has on his MC, the public role, he has Fanatica and Fraternitas. You see here, Fanatica and Fraternitas. So he is going to be known as somebody who brings about, Aries is the pioneer, right? Who pioneers some fanatical brotherhoods, right? Which is obviously what he did, right? The AA, the OTO, that's what he, what was his role really, to bring about these groups, and the Thelemites, lastly, right? Now, when you look at his sun, now the sun, especially with the Leo ascendant, the sun is going to be very important, is the ruler of the chart, right? And the sun goes into the fourth, and it's a Libra sun, so he's going to be, he's going to be somebody who always needs other people, partners around him, and he always had partners, right? He always had people that even, when he had his downloads, his spiritual downloads, he went with this other guy into the desert, right? And stayed there for a long time. The guy was sort of kind of a servant of sorts. And in many other episodes as well, there's always some partner involved, like you have with Libra people. But now look at his sun. What's constellated there with it? You got Thule and Mason coal, right? Yeti and Ganymede, right? These are all on his sun. Thule is a island, a mythical island, a mysterious mythical island, which stands for occult secrets, right? It was supposed to be the Nazis wanted to find this island. They had like these expeditions. They went up there to try and find it. And what else? Mason, the Freemason, right? Yeti is like the person who, the enigmatic thing that people don't know, what it is really. And Ganymede stands for androgyny and breaking sexual taboos, breaking sexual barriers. In some ways, you could say transsexualism. Ganymede stands for. So you have these here. Basically, he is the mysterious person, right? The mysterious Freemason who has these tendencies or this purpose, right, as his sun mission, right, to bring about these sexual transgressions, right? And what else? He's got Stonehenge and Fama and Albion here with this Jupiter Venus, right? Jupiter Venus also in the fourth, like he's going to be able to attract a lot of wealth and a lot of, he died poor at the end of the day, but he was a vast kind of, he spent a lot, right? He was always attracting things to him, and then kind of obviously endowed in the fourth house. He was by his family already endowed him with a lot to start with, right? But importantly, you got Stonehenge, Fama, Albion. Albion is the old name for England, right? So you have here the famous English, and Stonehenge is Druid, right? The famous English Druid, right? And Ishtar. Ishtar is what? Is the goddess of Babylon. Now Babylon is very important. Babylon stands for we'll come back to that. You'll see when I wrap that story, when I bring that story back. Just keep Babylon in mind right now. So all of this you've got here in the chart. And then what is he doing? What's his purpose, right? What is his purpose? This is important as well. The sun here, because the sun is in opposition, in a wide opposition really, right? Here with Chiron, pretty much direct, and then wide to Neptune. And what is this with? We have here Prometheus and Babylon again. Okay, so I was going to say, well, no, there we are actually. Babylon again, right? So Babylon is very important. It stands for that you will find Babylon and Ishtar and other signs relating to Babylon in a lot of the people who over the centuries are part of the ruling elites, right? You'll often find signs of Babylon. It goes back to the whore of Babylon, right? The harlot, which is talked about already in the book of Revelation, in the Bible, right? So you have this here, Prometheus and Babylon are with his Neptune and his Chiron, right? Which is up here in the 10th house. You have, the wise teacher, and the mystic is obviously the 10th house is the career and profession. His career and profession is to be a wisdom teacher and a mystic, right? And then you have here Pluto with church and ate. Ate is the conspiracy, and church, is the church, and Pluto is dark powers, right? So, and this is in the 11th of alliances. So he builds dark alliances that consists of conspiracies against the church, right? That's what he does. He's part of dark alliances against the church, obviously, right? It was his purpose to bring down the church and bring down any type of religiosity that is against, that is grounded in tradition. Let's put it this way. That's grounded in tradition. That doesn't want to destroy traditions, but actually preserve traditions, right? Unlike what he was preaching. Now, what else? This is really crazy. You have everything here pretty clearly. Lucifer and Sappho with Moon. Sappho is another asteroid that stands for transgression, sexual transgressions. And Lucifer with Moon, right? So this is like his endowment, right? This is his power, his karma in many ways. The Moon is very important in determining all of these things. And that's his philosophy, his life philosophy as well, the 9th house. right? The ninth house is your philosophy. Now, here we've got something very interesting as well. You see here, he's got Saturn with Typhon and Sicilia, right? And here Salamoni. Typhon is in the Greek mythology, it's the dark kind of titanic force that Zeus has to fight against, right? It's some kind of dark demonic titanic force. And then you have here Sicily and Salamoni. Salamoni is what stands for the evocation of demons. Solomon, like Solomon, right? The invoker of the master of demons. So you have the evocation of demons and Sicily on Saturn, right? Saturn, where he has his harshest lessons. And what did he do? He went to Sicily. As you can see in the chart, he actually went to Sicily and he had this commune there in this little place in Sicily, where it was like unspeakable things happened there. They had like this, they did the ritual, they did a very large ritual there, so-called Abremelin ritual, which is a long ritual, goes back into occult history. And they also did a lot of kind of just weird transgressions there with animals and with other people that, some people died there, some of his followers who went there, they died, some of his young followers. Others were scarred for life. They had just developed all kinds of trauma. They had post-traumatic stress disorders forever afterward. And just all kinds of crazy things like that happened in Sicily, where he had his cult, basically. And then, so you see all of these things, all of the stories about him, they're all in here, right? You can see that in the chart. Hypnos and Magion that I started with, right? The person who can hypnotize others. There's a lot of stories of him, how he did hypnotize people, how he got people to do what he wanted. There's a story, for instance, where he had the famous tarot deck made, the Thoth tarot deck that still a lot of people use to this day, right? It's a famous tarot deck. And this deck, it was created by this lady, his collaborator of sorts. And this lady, she was basically he had her locked into this house, and she couldn't come out until she had finished drawing the drawings, right? On his instructions, obviously, right? He gave the instructions. And she was basically under a spell, right? You would say like she was hypnotized, and she had to obey, and she had to do this until she was done. And this is basically, we're going to ask yourself, so when I'm talking about magical powers, he invented himself the writing with the CK, right? He would say magic with CK instead of just with a C, to differentiate it from sort of stage magic, right? So you're going to ask yourself, maybe if you're not so much into this space, into the kind of spiritual practices and occultism and so on, you're going to ask yourself, is that what it is? Is that what magic is? By the way, first of all, don't let me forget this. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet, and hit the notification bell, even if you're already subscribed, so that you don't miss videos. It's going to help us all to connect on that level with consciousness and intelligence together. Also, tell me some comments what you think about what I'm saying here. That also helps boost the content. And then we can continue with what I was saying, namely when you think about magic, right, or occult practices. So you're going to say, what is that? Is that just hypnotizing people? Is that could be just scamming people, in some ways too. Some people are scam artists, con artists. They could be very persuasive. Is that just that? Is that all it is? Well, not exactly, right? There are higher levels of intelligence. There are higher levels of consciousness. And if you are able to work in those higher levels of consciousness, you can influence reality. You can influence reality, right? So I'm going to tell you here something so you know how this works and how it doesn't work. A lot of people think, okay, either they're complete skeptics and they're coming from the scientific materialist perspective, and they're like, magic doesn't exist, it's not true, right? Oh, this is just kids believe in it or whatever, right? So if you grow up, you won't believe in this. And then there's others, and those people, they're only seeing like a small portion of reality, and they think that's it, that's all there is, right? They're a super tiny limited portion of reality, and they think that's all there is. Then there is others who think that magic is like Harry Potter stuff, right? So basically you just kind of wave a wand and then things start to move and things start to levitate and stuff. Wingardium Leviosa. That's also not what it is, right? It's not what it is. Because you can't break the laws of nature. You can't break the rules, the laws of nature, unless somebody is extremely advanced, and can do actual miracles, like Moses parting the seas, right? That is, extremely advanced. That's like a 6th level initiate from the 7th. That's like the highest, almost close to being God yourself, right? So this is not something that people can do generally, like doing materializing miracles that break the laws of nature, right? Magic, when it's practiced in reality, like somebody like Crowley would do it, and like many others are aspiring to do it, right? Or spiritual technologies, let's call it. Let's not even use that word, spiritual technologies. They don't operate like that. They don't break the laws of nature. I will tell you a story from Crowley so you understand how they do operate. So Crowley, he was with a friend, and they were in England. They were, in the countryside, and they went to this pub. They had like a fight with somebody. They had like a bad fight, and it was like a lot of bad words, with bad insults and stuff. And Crowley just developed a grudge against that person who had insulted him, or who he thought had insulted him. And that's kind of where that ended. And months later, Crowley's friend, he met that guy that they had the fight with in the pub, right? Or in the tavern or whatever on the countryside. And that guy, he was missing an eye, right? He was blind on one eye. He had like this patch, and he was blind on one eye, right? And this guy, and his Crowley's friend asked the guy, like, he says, "What happened to you? What happened? How come you lost your eye?" And he says, "I was out there, and I was out walking in the fields, and there was a stray bullet from a hunter came and hit him. A stray bullet from a hunter who was hunting rabbits, right, hit this guy." And he says it was weird because just previously, before that, he also had another incident where he had an accident at home, and he also almost hurt his eye. But this time it wasn't like, the first time he just kind of had an accident, he hurt his eye a little bit, and then shortly after he was actually shot in the eye by a stray bullet, right? And then the friend says, "Oh, now I understand what's happening, because I saw the Master Therion," is how he would call Crowley, right? "I saw how the Master," as the friend is saying, "how he blackened out your eye on a photograph of you, right? On a picture, on a photograph of you." And that's how actually magic works. So how it works is, if somebody who's a practitioner, right, not just by blackening out, now don't go and do this obviously, right, not just by doing something to a photograph, right, like voodoo, but by somebody who actually has the abilities, right, to know the rituals, and who knows how to set certain symbolic actions. So listen to this, understand this. Symbolic actions, right? Certain symbolic actions are able to change the field of probabilities on the material plane, right? The guy does a certain symbolic action, and then the field of probabilities is changed so that this other guy is more likely to have an accident or be hit by a stray bullet. But now anybody who comes and looks at this, any skeptic, any observer, anybody will come and say, "Well, this is a coincidence. I cannot see anything magical about this. This is just a coincidence," right? And he would be right in some way. It is a coincidence. But it's an engineered coincidence. That's what spiritual technology, the engineering coincidences through working on the symbolic plane by bringing about different probabilities on the material plane, right? So this is how you understand how this works. And by the way, I need to say this, obviously, if you do something like this where you're harming somebody else, you're also interfering with the laws of karma, and you're going to get a backlash. You're going to get a hard backlash, right? This is why we don't go there. Not just because we're fearing the backlash, but because it's wrong as well, right? It's wrong. So there is certain things that you have to know and understand before you enter into this field and start to do things, work with symbolic energies, work with spiritual energies, right? There's certain safeguards, certain things you have to understand. This is one of them. And at this point, actually, I should go back to the chart. Then I'll tell you at the end, I've got a couple of more things to share with you. I'll tell you what the right-hand path looks like, how you work on the right-hand path, which is not the same thing, right? And we will see how, but before that, I have to tell you how Crowley, right? I got to wrap up that other thread that we started. We're weaving all of these threads. I got to tell you how Crowley can really be seen as the founder, right? Or as the kind of founding prophet of wokeism. All right, so let's go back at the chart, and what we saw here, right? It was on the Chiron up here, right? The Chiron, we had here Babylon. You see this? Babylon, Chiron with Babylon, right? That's what? That his Chiron is kind of always the source of higher wisdom in your chart. For normal people, let's say, Chiron oftentimes is just where they feel wounded. It's just some kind of pain, right? It's just some kind of inexplicable pain. But actually, when you develop the higher form of Chiron, it is the source of wisdom. It's the source of wisdom that comes through vulnerability, right? Higher wisdom. So, and you see this is with Babylon. Babylon, right? Now, what did I say about Babylon? Babylon is very central in the charts of the ruling elites, generally speaking, right? Very generally speaking. You see this recurring again and again. So when we look here at when Crowley received his main insights, he went into the desert, and then in Egypt, right? He went to Egypt and he received this message, and he said that he received it from an entity called Aiwass. He said that Aiwass gave him this this message to him, and he was just a messenger. And what was this message? It was the so-called the Book of the Law that he wrote, and the Book of the Law was basically his legacy, or his anti-gospel, right? His dark gospel that he brought and that he wanted to create a religion around, right? And that's where he said that there is a new age coming, and the new age is going to be like this. Everybody's going to be free. Everybody's going to transgress. Everybody's going to break all the rules and all the norms, right? That's what he received. That's what he received. And when did he receive it? In 1904. I'm going back here to find the time exactly. He received it in 1904, and in 3 days, in April of, we're getting closer and closer and closer and closer. There we are. April 7th, 8th, and here you see April 5th. What is it? Like you got here, April. In the first couple of days, first week of April, he received this, right? What's happening here in those days when he received this? April 4th, you see, April 4th, 5th. You got here exactly, the sun is on his MC, but Mercury, the messenger is exactly on his Chiron. Okay, what did we say? Chiron. He had the teacher, the wise teacher of Babylon, right? Of Babylon. And in those days, when he receives this message, Mercury is exactly on there. So he's speaking that truth, right? Or receiving that truth. Obviously, in addition to that, also, there is a lot of other important things going on here with some of these trans-Saturnian aspects. You always need trans-Saturnian aspects when you are going to have something of great historical relevance, right? Anybody who has done something that's of great historical relevance, it's always done under the influence of trans-Saturnian aspects. Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, right? I mean, Saturn and beyond and higher, right? Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and so on. And when you have multiple of those trans-Saturnian aspects hitting at the same time as Crowley had in that time, you're going to do something that has some larger effect, right? Some larger effect. But for who's behind it? In his case, we have seen clearly it's the same forces, which, he went on to talk about it. He often said that he was going to bring about, he was the sage of Babylon, right? Or the messenger of Babylon. He always talked about the scarlet woman, which is the harlot, and, of that we have in the book of Revelation, the whore of Babylon, right? Okay, so, and I'm going to tell you here this to wrap this part up, right? This is from the book of Revelation, from the Apostle John, the most beloved apostle of the Lord, Jesus Christ. And the whore of Babylon is there depicted as a woman sitting on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls, right? Looking like these woke cultural advocates, right? Looking like the woke cultural advocates, holding a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication, right? Preaching fornication, preaching impurity, preaching all types of breaking, the transgressing against all types of bounds of propriety, especially of sexual kind. Bearing the inscription, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And she is drunk on the blood of saints and martyrs, representing the persecution of the righteous. Because during the reign of Babylon, the martyrs and the saints and the righteous are persecuted. They are censored. They are blocked. They are blacklisted. They are, they have the weight of the entire system come against them. And that's the rule of the time that Aleister Crowley was a vehicle for, was a messenger for. He was a messenger for these larger dark forces. And this is very clear, and I've proven it to you now. Now, I'm still going to tell you two things. How is the right-hand path different? In the right-hand path, you also acquire certain forces. You acquire certain powers. You are able to reach certain higher levels of consciousness, right? And you are able to unlock certain abilities as well. However, you don't do this by glorifying yourself. You don't do this by glorifying your own will, positing your own will as the end all and be all. On the contrary, you do this by becoming a vehicle for God, by making yourself empty, by allowing yourself to be a tool, an instrument, a servant for God. That's it. And then what you gain and what you get is God's will for you to get. It's not something that you are greedy for. It's not something that you are greedy for powers or greedy for capabilities or greedy for blessings and so on and so forth. No, you simply do your job. You simply do what is in the path of the fulfillment of God's will, and everything else comes along with it. It comes when it's time for it to come. When it's time for God to bring you those blessings, right? Not when you want them to come, not when you want to manifest them or to trick your way into, manipulate your way into getting them. So different paths of realization, We'll talk much more about this in future. And one more thing I have to tell you here still is who is Jack Parsons, because I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Jack Parsons, he was this scientist, rocketry, he invented rocketry, right? The U.S. space program is, or NASA's work is somehow based on his inventions, and he then blew himself up. There's a Netflix series that was made about him. He actually was also the leader of a Thelema group in Los Angeles, of a Crowleyan group in Los Angeles, right? He became the leader of this group of Thelemites in Los Angeles. And Jack Parsons, he is today incarnated as Teal Swan. All right, I'm going to put the pictures here so you can see. And you can see the similarity very clearly in the face. And there is clear indicators in the charts as well, right? The charts show you exactly where one ends and the other begins. You have, for instance, the inventor and the rocketry and stuff. You have that in Teal Swan's chart, right? So because there is a repetition. But she has come with a different mission. She has come with a different opportunity right now, right? Jack Parsons, he was under the influence of Crowley, definitely, but he was not yet all the way committed as Crowley is, because that happens on a higher level where you have to completely commit, right, to that side. So Teal Swan, there's still a lot of space for her, a lot of space for free decision and for her to evolve and to find her path and her way. She hasn't yet fully done that, if she hasn't yet fully done that yet. Now, if you want to find out where your own abilities are, where your own psychic abilities are, where your own innate abilities are that you can work on a magical path, on a spiritual technologies path, which I'd rather like to call it, right? And And if you want to do that, and if you want to know where you have those innate abilities, there's a video that you should watch after this that I did before, the complete guide to how to find your psychic powers in the birth chart. I'm going to link that here, and you can find it there, and you can see and learn for yourself. One more time, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Also hit the notification bell, and if you are already here and have been with us here in the Ultra Sapient Collective, make sure to comment and like this video. This is really important. It helps us boost this, and let me know how you feel about these insights and these revelations. It is a great pleasure as always to share with you. Be well and be blessed.